Welcome back, everybody. I hope you took some time to have some great reflection on your assessment and on your goals that you wanted to set, because it's so important that you buy what you sell. It's so important that you reflect what you want your people to do. So now on this next session, what we're going to talk about is we're going to start on this section and on the rest of them. We're going to start to dig a little bit deeper into each one of the purposes and seeing how they reflect into your group, your small groups, and how they reflect into your church. So after each one of these sessions, we're going to be simultaneously building two plans, one for your church and one for your small group. So you've done the planner for your personal plan. Now we're going to work on your group's game plan and on your church's game plan. So this first one is talking about fellowship and how to connect every person in your church. Now, when you're thinking of fellowship, what you want to make sure is that you're setting up the right form of fellowship when you're thinking about your small group.
Are you tired of small groups always getting into your business, trying to get you to share your feelings, discuss your past, confess your sins? Are you just looking for a place to kick it, network, maybe get some free grub?
Me too. That's why I created what I believe to be the world's first openly shallow small group. We're not here to deal with messy stuff like feelings and emotions. You got problems? You deal with them. You're an adult. Life ain't easy, so stop the pity party. We all have our issues.
We don't really want to do life together. Frankly, at Shallow Small Group, we try not to do much of anything at all. You'll never hear us use the term, unpack that thought. We're sure it's packed away for a really good reason. And you'll never hear us use the term accountability unless you're talking about someone who deals with numbers. Hey dude, thanks for doing my taxes. You have great accountability. And spiritual growth? Who wants growth? I had a growth removed last week. It wasn't pleasant. There's no pressure here to remember each other's name.
What's going on, buddy?
Oh, hey man, how's it going?
That's going good.
Hey, Chief. Oh, dude.
Captain, what's going on?
We know you have a name, and that's the important thing. Group discussion? You got tickets to the big game? Sweet. Let's spend some time on that. Oh, you and your wife are struggling financially? There's tension in the relationship? That's not really the vibe we're going for. We avoid conflict like the plague.
Who wants cake? Come on and get it!
And there will never, ever be an awkward silence. That's our guarantee to you. We hate bad theology as much as the next guy, and we know the surest way to prevent bad theology is to avoid theology altogether.
And outreach? This is the only outreach you'll ever have to do. Some people say we're superficial. But hey, the word super isn't superficial. I mean, who doesn't want to be super?
Shallow small group, because when things get too deep, people drown. Won't you join us?
How do you connect everybody in your church? Not only do you want to connect them, but you want these connections to be meaningful, and you want the fellowship to be deep and robust. So your first fill-in right there at the top of the page is, how do you bring 110% of the people in and connect them into life-changing communities? Now, the first thing you're saying is like going, okay, 110%. That is more than the people we have. Exactly. The thing I want you to do is be dreaming about how can we connect more people in our groups than we do in our weekend services. Since 2004, Saddleback Church has been consistently running more in the small group network than in the weekend services. What we're trying to do is be able to let small groups be that evangelistic arm that is reaching out to people that may be too scared to come to the weekend, but they're very comfortable coming to your living room. So, how do we do that? Number one, be intentional. remove the barriers, and focus on the benefits. Now, if you haven't figured out yet, we're back into your learner's guide. So I want to continue to remind you, there's a lot of great resources in here, and obviously the notes are in here. So let's work together, and your planners will also be there. So we want to make sure that we're dialed in together, making sure this happens. So, being intentional. Why is that so critical for us? Well, in the beginning, in Genesis 2:18, in the most perfect environment known to mankind, the Garden of Eden, God said it is not good for man to be alone. In the very essence of how we are wired, how God put us together, community, fellowship is important. So you have to be intentional to helping them get the correct type of biblical fellowship. It's known fact that the most punishing things you can do to people is to put them in solitary confinement. Why? Because you're wired for community. And when community isn't there, then you're going to go crazy. So you want to be intentional on what you're doing. Look at John chapter 10, verse 14. It says, I know the sheep, and the sheep know my voice. You want to help pull them into that community, to their Savior who created them and knows them. You're going to quickly learn as we go through this talk is that fellowship, both in your weekend services and in your house-to-house, your small groups, is more than coffee and cookies. It's being intentional to take them to a deeper, deeper place. Look at this phrase in your notes. It says, understand the minds of the unconnected sheep. Never forget the feeling of doing something for the first time. You know, wherever it's at, when you're meeting people in your neighborhood or in your workplace or seeing people on how they're coming to your church, you've got to be thinking through, what was it like for me the first time? And keeping that so fresh in your mind. One of the things for group life, what you've got to always be considering is, what are the major barriers that stop people from wanting to be in a group?
Bob and I have been married for several years now, and we've always wanted to connect with other people, but when it comes to being part of one of these small groups, well, we've always heard that they're, how do I put this, weird.
Yeah, weird.
Really weird. And that being a part of these groups is sort of like belonging to a cult of some kind. There's no way we'd fit into a group like that.
Believe, sister? Yes. Do you believe? Oh, do you believe? Yeah, light up my life. Everyone, yeah, light up my life.
Besides, even if everyone is fairly normal, the whole thing seems really scary. I mean, we're not very spiritual.
We're just afraid that we won't be able to meet their standards.
To be honest, neither of us are very good at sticking to a strict religious routine.
All right, you spiritual babies! If you want to be in my small group, it's going to take dedication and sacrifice and the will to persevere. You need to be all you can be. Do you understand?
Sir, yes, sir.
I can't hear you.
Sir, yes, sir.
That's better. Now drop and give me 20.
Bob's also worried about how being in a small group might somehow intrude on our privacy.
Yeah, if there's one thing I like, it's my personal privacy.
I can't. Are we there yet? I can't. It's close clear.
Yeah, let's go.
I can't.
Keep going. We're almost there. We're almost with the goal. Get in quick. Get in quick. Oh, God.
Don't let him go. Why did you accept Christ?
How long have you been a Christian?
Inquiry minds want to know.
Yeah, we want to know.
Any more on the way?
How much did you pay for this thing?
We're purchasing square footage of your house.
Oh, that's a good one.
What's your annual salary before taxes?
What's your greatest hidden sin?
I guess an even bigger problem is our lack of time.
Yeah, we're really busy.
Too busy, especially for a small group. There's just no way it could work out. Being in a small group just takes up so much time.
Okay, so we have this intertestamental period right here between the Old and the New Testament. So, what I need you to do before next week is to read 1st and 2nd Chronicles and make sure you memorize all of the descendants' names. Also, I'll probably need you to write about an 8,000-word essay on those descendants and how they relate to the intertestamental period, paying special attention to the Maccabean revolt and the prophetic writings found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, please, people, please, also before next week, memorize these Bible passages. Ezekiel chapter 6, 11 to 14, Deuteronomy chapter 11, and chapter...
You know, we couldn't even go if we wanted to. We have 3 small children.
Yeah, and babysitters cost a fortune these days.
What would we do with the kids?
It was such a blessing having you here, and next time, don't even worry about finding a babysitter.
No, we've got the perfect solution.
Probably the number one issue that groups have when they're trying to build community is childcare. Childcare is one of the number things. And when you look through your notes right there, you'll see we've outlined a number of things that you can do to help your groups kind of get over that childcare barrier. But the bottom line is this: you make things that are a priority happen. If I gave you 2 tickets to the Super Bowl, or 2 tickets to the World Cup soccer tournament, or 2 tickets to whatever an opera you wanted to see, if it's a value to you, you'll make it happen. And one of the things with childcare is you want to do some tactical things, but you also want to be able to help people understand if they want to make fellowship happen, it's going to take some part of them to make that happen. Now, one of the things, because, of a parent with children and all that, I remember those zones. And probably one of the most effective things we did was that we would have a couple, we'd have some people that would go out and watch the kids in a different part of the house. Now, you never want to take a couple out and do that because all they do is just get kids for the evening. But you take 2 guys or 2 ladies, they get some fellowship together, and at the same time, the child care starts to be taken care of. And like I said, there's a number of things that you can do. You can add number 8 to your notes, and that would be do just like we did in the video, but I wouldn't recommend it. Another thing is fear of intimacy, lack of spiritual maturity, time availability, lack of biblical literacy, past experiences with group. There's a number of things that are barriers. But what you want to do is help them to see the benefits with that. So what I want you to do is just take a minute. Now, some of you heard 5 minutes, but I'm just going to give you a minute, and I want you to just discuss this and look at what are the benefits. You fill in the blanks this time, and you tell me. So go discuss. Okay, so now what were some of those things that you came up with? I mean, I hope some of the things like you heard was like community or relationships, Bible studies, spiritual growth, being able to find my ministry, being able to make evangelism something that's real and beneficial. There's so many things that you can do, but you've got to be able to show the benefits of group life. You know, one of the things, and you can kind of see us up on the slide, is that at Saddleback Church we take notes in our weekend services. And when my daughter was young, one of the things that we were doing a recap of the year, and you were asked, you know, what is someone or something that you're thankful for in that particular year? And you know, my daughter happened to be in the service with us, and it was so great as a dad to be able to see what she wrote right here. And right there, as we blow it up, you'll see that she said, "Everybody in my small group." Now, as a dad, you know, at that time, I don't know, my daughter was either 8 or 9, but it's powerful for her to be so excited about group like what I was. I want you to look at this call out that we have right there from Rick Warren. It says, you have to spend time with people, lots of time, to build deep relationships. This is why fellowship is so shallow in many churches. We don't spend enough time together. And the time we do spend is usually listening to one person speak. That one person is usually the senior leader talking to them at the service. And the thing I'm just trying to encourage you, fellowship needs to be intentional and it needs to go deep. Number 2, you want to share Jesus' dream of finding a shepherd for every sheep. You want to share Jesus' dream of finding a shepherd for every sheep. Look at Matthew 9:36-38. It says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion. Circle that word compassion right there. He had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like a sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. One of the things that each one of us need to do is have that same dream of finding that shepherd for every sheep. You got to have the eyes of Jesus saying, do I see people as connected or unconnected? And how can I get them organically starting to get into their own groups, being connected to our church? 2 Corinthians 5:14 says, for Christ's love compels us. You know, have you ever noticed that when you're going to buy anything, whether it's maybe a new smartphone or a new car, you start seeing those around your neighborhood a lot, or you see people with them a lot. You know, if you're looking to buy a car, all of a sudden you're going to see that type of car on the road all the time. Now, is that because the manufacturer knew the car you wanted to buy, and so he was producing more of those in your neighborhood? No. What it is it's that you value that new thing so much that it gets through your brainstem, and so you start to recognize it more. In the same way, where are you with the things that concerns Jesus? When you walk in your small group or through your neighborhood, are you content? Or are you seeing people that need to be connected? When you are around church, are you seeing people that may need to get connected? Or are you seeing people that are unconnected? Do you have the eyes of Jesus? Number 3, utilize all communication avenues for getting people connected. Now, the thing here is I like to say, you want to make fellowship a verb. You want to make it action-oriented. You want to take it to that next step. Let me go through a few bullet points here. One is that, pray for the Lord of the harvest. Again, you want to pray for those people to come through. And so if you have a prayer team at your church or you have a prayer, you want to pray that every person gets connected. Another thing is personal invitations. Personal invitations. There was an article in the USA Today a while back that talked about that life's connections aren't all plugins. And I know we live in a very technological age, we live in a very social media driven age, but there's still that component where people love personal connection. They like that personal invite. Pulpit announcements should be driving people to get connected, but anything you can do with that. The bulletin or your website should be able to drive that. Newsweek had an article that talked about putting the we in web and trying to get people connected and all that. But what's amazing is that article was 7 years ago, and the web was one form of getting people connected. Well, I don't want to scare you, but look at this next slide. These are all the latest social networking tools that you can use to help people get connected. Not just where you're at, but in the virtual world too. A small group table, you should always, that's almost like your concierge table at your church. You want to be able to have that. Sign-ups, testimonies in your services. When anybody ever gives a testimony about being in a small group and the value of it, you see, when you talk as a senior leader, let me talk to the senior leaders at the church. When you talk about getting in small groups, you're the salesperson. But when you have somebody get up and give a testimony, they're the satisfied customer. Are you going to get into a group because of the salesperson? Maybe. But when you hear the satisfied customer, you're much more excited about that. And then targeting communities. If you live in a place where new communities are being built, those are areas you want to start to think about, okay, how do I connect those people? People get involved in community when life change happens. And so when people move into new neighborhoods or new neighborhoods are built, you're going to find the ability to take community to a whole different level. Number 4 is you want to view transitions as strategic times to help people connect. You want to view transitions. Now, the question is, what type of transitions? You can have significant events, that may be in your church, such as like baptisms or baby dedications or weddings. Significant events are great opportunities for people to understand, hey, here's the next step for you to be able to get connected to a group. Struggles, loss of a loved one or financial. Around us here at Saddleback, we live near a military base. And I want to show you this picture. We use struggles as a powerful time that this is one of our groups, and this is one of our groups in Kuwait. And one of the soldiers was deployed to Kuwait, and so we gave him the materials to connect people and get them into a group. So what's great about that is the U.S. military is paying for our missionaries to go out to other places. So if you live by a military base, but any type of struggles are great opportunities to get people connected. Spiritual steps. In our culture, we have classes like 101, 201, 301, 401 that we always give invitations for people to get connected to a group or start a group is our preference. Seasonal beginnings. This is great. Use the calendar. Do you know, when you're trying to connect people in your church, you got to think like Hallmark. Hallmark is brilliant because they invent holidays to sell cards. I was in Target, and this is about 3 years ago, and my kids came up with 2 cards, and it's not like I'm a cheapskate, but they were both almost $5, $4.95. 2 cards for my dog's birthday. And I'm just like going, there is no way I am buying 2 birthday cards for an animal that can't read. So, and as you know, as any married man knows, when my wife gave me the look, I was happy to spend $11 on cards for a dog that couldn't read. But you got to think like Hallmark. So like in January, it's the start of a new year. So many people want to get new, fresh starts. You can start any type of group in January. In February, you could capitalize off Valentine's Day and think about, what are groups we could start there? Well, you could start some dating groups. You could start some couples groups. In March, I can't think of any good biblical group to start in March, but maybe you're moving it towards Easter, and it's a great opportunity for you to do that. April, you could start April Fool's groups. I don't know. My point is, when you get into May, it's a little bit easier. You can start moms groups. In June, you could start dads groups because of Father's Day. The point is, people will rise to your challenge. People will take action when you put something before them. So utilize transitions and think through all those, different seasonal beginnings. There's also stops and starts, that you just want to be able to say, any time of the year, if you have a 4-week window or a 5-week window, when people know there's a stop and a start, they'll be willing to start a group. I love that call out because it said, God uses both change and pain to make people receptive to the gospel and to connect others to them. Number 5, wanting to get people connected, is unleash the power of the campaign strategy. Now, I know that when you're trying to start small groups in your churches, there's 2 types of churches. One where the senior pastor is got buy-in. You got senior pastor buy-in, and they want to make it happen. You want to use the campaign strategy for senior leaders or pastors that are bought in with you, and they want to make this happen. Point number 6 is the one you want to use if you don't have senior pastor buy-in. So let me go to the first one first. To unleash the campaign strategy, there are some key elements in how Saddleback Church does a campaign. In my book, Small Groups with Purpose, it's in chapter 17, we talk all about all the details that you need to understand in doing a campaign from a church perspective. But here are some of the highlights. One is it's the host versus leader terminology. When we want to start a group, we obviously, to say, hey, if you have 2 friends, you can start a group. But here are your qualifying points. Host, H-O-S-T. Do you have a heart for people? Can you open up your place? Can you serve a snack? Can you turn on a DVD player? If you can do those 4 things and you have 2 friends, you can lead a group at Saddleback Church. It makes the bar low so that lots of people can enter into it. But sometimes if you call them a leader, you scare people. So let me go back to my example at Saddleback. When I first came on staff here, our hosts were called shepherd leaders or lay pastors. We had both terms, and both were terrible. But when we used those terms, we would get people like by the tens. And then we went to the term leader, and we would get a lot more people. But when we went to the term host, we got thousands of people. Now, here's the interesting part. The qualifications have stayed the same. It's just the terms that changed. Something to consider. Another key element is thinking exponential. And what I would say to you, what do you dream, how many groups do you dream about starting? And then add a 0 to that. Because when you add a 0 to something, it forces you to think different. It forces you to approach things different. I remember the first campaign we did in 2002, we did that same thing. We would usually start about 300 groups in a year. And Rick said, I want to start 3,000 groups in a week. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and say, what are all the obstacles and what would take that away and what do we need to do? And you know what? God blessed us and we did it. One of the major things that we learned was in this drawing right here. Because in a typical church, you're in the matchmaking business. You're trying to find person Y, connect them to group X that they like. But one of the things we learned in a campaign was being able to start with your, don't pull somebody to your group, but challenge them to start a new group, start their own group with their friends. Because whenever you plug somebody that's visiting your church into an existing small group, you inoculate them from their friends. What you want to do is have them go to their existing network of friends and to take that deeper. On the top of your next page, you'll see just some other things that makes the campaign strategy powerful, and that is we put the responsibility on the host to fill the groups. Why? Because if you don't have 2 friends, if you can't get people to go to your group, then you're not a leader. We want to identify the leaders. And then if you don't have those two friends, then or you can't, then we'll help plug you into an existing group, which is that other part. They fill the group with people they already have a relationship with. The campaign strategy has senior pastor buy-in. Rick is my biggest champion to making small groups happen at Saddleback Church. He preaches on it, but more importantly, he talks about his own personal small group. And when I look at Rick Warren and I look how busy he is and I look at all the things he has, one of the things that he always makes room for is having time for his small group because they're his friends. He already meets with them. Short-term opportunities, whenever you do a campaign, we always tell people just, hey, let's start it now and then we'll end it. And then if you don't want to continue, no problem. But if you do want to continue it, we'll make it go. And again, when you start a group with friends, you have a higher retention rate because they're already friends and they've already figured out when to meet and how to meet with people. We also make training and curriculum that are simple and easy to use. When we do a campaign strategy, on every one of our DVDs, we always put helps for hosts. And so literally a host could watch our 3 to 5 minute training before group starts and know enough to be dangerous to get the group going. And the other point there is use groups as the distribution point. So one of the things we do on our campaigns is we attack all 5 of the learning styles. Some people learn with their mind. So we have some great things where they can be challenged mentally and they can memorize scripture. Some people learn through their eyes. So we have a daily reading plan for them. Some people learn through their mouth, through discussion. That's why small groups are important. Some people learn through their ears. So they need to be able to listen, and that's why we have the weekend messages. Some people learn through their hands. And that's why we want to, make them, we want to give them a project to do so they can get out there and get tactile. The point is that we want to, through the small group, we funnel the projects through there. So the tactile people, if they want to do a project, they got to be in a group. The daily devotions, those booklets are all through the group. If you want to study and learn the weekend messages, you got to be in a group. The bottom line is, if you're not in a group, you're missing out. The other thing during campaigns, our children's, our students, and our adults are all doing the same curriculum, age graded appropriate. And so what you want to be able to do is understand is that when you have the family unit and the children doing it, it puts a lot of pressure on the parents to say, wow, we got to follow through too. You'll also see a couple other bullet points there. Hosts need support from someone that can encourage them, and that's when we talked about infrastructure before, that power piece. And then topics that are user-friendly, or it's the relevant question that people are always searching for. And so like in 2002, we did 40 Days of Purpose, and it was, what on earth am I here for? Was the relevant question. When we did one on love and on relationships, it was, what builds a healthy relationship? The thing is, you just want to take it to that level. Number 6 is use connection events as a strategy to get attendees or attenders in groups. And this is one, you may be out there and you may be want to champion small groups in your church, and you're saying, yeah, but my senior pastor isn't on board like Rick Warren. He doesn't champion it like Rick Warren. Well, first off, you shouldn't compare, remember? But in case you are doing that, this is a great strategy that you can use also. And again, I go into much more detail in my book in chapter 16, Small Groups with Purpose, but this is enough to make you dangerous. But basically, all this is a big mixer. We get people into a room that want to get into a small group. And so what we do is we just have a mixer where they'll answer different types of questions. They'll answer affinity questions, and we'll have them, kind of meet different people in the room. And sometimes we'll even set the tables up, a couples, a men's table, a women's table, a singles table, a couples table, so that they could maybe naturally gravitate to that. But inside this mixer time, we have them answer affinity questions so they can get to know each other. We have them answer leadership questions so you can start to see, who's a leader in your circle. And we have them answer spiritual questions. So you not only find out who's the leader, but who's the best leader. And then at the end of the evening, what we do is we just have them pray together. And then on the count of 3, we just have them point to who they think should lead the group. Now, what I've seen in all the years that we did that was that always the majority points to one person at the table. And then here's what you do. You go around the circle and explain why you pointed to that person. And when you have their peers explaining why they picked them, 100 out of 100 times, when we ask those people, would you be willing to lead these people if we gave you a DVD curriculum? They say yes in a heartbeat. So there's some things that you can dial into there. Here's the point. You need to have some connection strategy. You know, as a dad, I have a special needs kid. And one of the most painful parts of our journey is when I drop Ethan off to school and I watch him play on the playground. Because my prayer every time I drop him off or every time I see him on the playground is always the same. And it's this, God, would you send somebody, anybody, just to connect with him? And as a dad, it rips my heart out because I'll see him kind of off by himself and shunned by other people. But here's the analogy for each one of us, and that is our Heavenly Father prays the same prayer I pray every Sunday and every day when you're out and about in your busy life. And he prays, would somebody connect with the creation that I made? Because God cares about every person. Not just the pretty people, not just the smart people, not just the people that have it together, not just, the rich people. God cares about everybody. And your church's responsibility is to connect the community and to connect people into groups. You need to answer the question, what kind of strategy do we have? Once you have that strategy in place, kind of brings it all home, and that is with number 7, and that is you need to provide a safe environment to help relationships go deeper once they're connected. Provide a safer environment to help relationships connect even deeper. Now, up on the screen is this picture. What's this picture? Well, it's simple. It's an iceberg. Now, I know some of you are looking at it and you're like, oh, well, I think I see Jesus under the water. I think I see his face or something like that. No, it's just an iceberg. But why do I show it to you? Because so often fellowship is like an iceberg. People show up above the waterline. They say that most icebergs are 20% above the water, 80% below the water. And so what happens is that when we think of fellowship, we think about what's above the waterline. And what we have to realize is that there's a lot of life below the waterline. So your responsibility is once you get people connected, or once you grab a couple of your friends and start a group, your responsibility is to say, how do I build a safe environment so that we can get to know people below the water surface, so that we can get to know people in a deeper way? Because below the waterline, you're going to find things that are maybe scary, they may be surprises, or there may be things that are just unbelievably cool about people that you never knew. So how do you do that? How do you build a safe environment so that once you get people connected, or once they take a risk and they grab a couple of friends, how do you build that? Well, we have an acrostic for our safe piece, and the S stands for seek authentic connections. Seek authentic connections. You want to create an environment where people can feel real and authentic. One of the things we were just joking about in our small group is saying, hey, if we're going to be authentic, why do we have to clean our houses before people come over? And there's a lot of truth behind that humor. But the bottom line is you want to get things where it's just real. You know, if you're ever on social media, everyone's life is picture perfect. But part of being in true communities, you want authentic connections where if you're having a good day, that's awesome. If you're having a bad day, that's a bummer too. That's why in Romans 15 it talks about weep with those who weep. You want to laugh with those who laugh. You want to have a great time. But if someone's having a terrible time, you want to match and you want to weep with those who weep. Let your group one where honesty isn't awkward. We hope that each one of your groups get to that place where you can be honest with one another. I like that call out. It says the most difficult risk of all is to be honest with ourselves and with others. A couple other points there. Let weakness be the strength of your group. I've always found people are never excited about the accolades that I may get or I may not get. But what people are always drawn to is when you're human, when you have weaknesses. People can relate with that. And weakness, ironically, can be a strength in small groups. You know, another point is don't let the agenda drive out the Holy Spirit. Now, the thing is that once you have the perfect lesson plan, guess what? Someone's going to come in and their life is going to be distraught and they're going to be going through a tough time. And you've got this great lesson that you want to train them in. But the thing is, God's agenda is always people. So always be looking at your people and saying, their agenda first, my great lesson comes second. The A is you want to accept one another. Accept one another. And this is listening skills. Slow to speak, quick to listen. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them proportionally in that way. Now, I don't know when we're talking about listening if any of you have had this happen with your spouses before, but one time Lisa and I were dialoguing and I may have been multitasking just a little bit with my smartphone, but she asked me that question, what did I just say? Now, I'm not, super charismaniac, but I was in that moment going, God, if you could give me a word of knowledge, this would be a great time. God, if you just give me the first word, maybe I can build from it and know where I'm going. But then Lisa asked me again, she goes, no, I want to know, what did I just say? So I said, well, if you want to know what you just said, you just ask me the question, what did I just say? Which I really wouldn't recommend in any marriage therapy because it wasn't a good place to go. But the bottom line is that what I learned is you listen with your eyes. When you're looking at somebody, you're listening to them. You listen with your eyes. Another great thing you can do when you're talking about accepting one another is being able to rephrase words or rephrase what they said. This is what I heard. Or to be able to say, is there anything else? Because sometimes when people share, it took so much for them to share, but they don't want to share too much. But by you going, is there anything else? It can be very powerful to folks. And so you just want to accept people where they're at. You just want to be able to say, come as you are, you'll be loved. And that's another thing I love about small group. You don't have to dress up for it. You don't have to do anything. You just come and you love and you accept each other because they're your friends. The F stands for focused leadership. Focused leadership. Sometimes it's in conflict resolution. And here's what I'd say. The number one thing to fix conflict resolution is Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17. And that's when Jesus said, if you have a problem with somebody, you go to them. If you still have a problem, bring somebody else. If you still have a problem with them, bring the church leadership into it. So the great thing is in conflict resolution, here's what you can always listen for. If they're talking, if you group in group, if they're talking about somebody who is not present in a negative way, you need to stop that right then and there and be able to say, oh, just let me put a pause right here for a second. Have you talked to the person about how you're feeling? And if they say no, just don't shame them, but say, one of the cool things I learned is in Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17, Jesus knew more about relationships than us. And he said, if you have a problem with somebody, you should go to them. So just, don't make a big deal of it, but just say, hey, can we pause that right now? And just go ahead and talk to them. Or let's say, you stop it and they say, yeah, I did talk to them. You say, well, that's great. I'm the group leader. Let me go back with you. It sounds like you're still having some struggles, and we'll take care of this. The point is, you want to keep your leadership focused. It's your job to protect the flock. It's your job to work with people where they're at. So, big point, but you should know it. Extra grace required people or extra care required people. And just know, every one of us go through a season when we just, we need a little bit extra. And just be willing to be able to say, God made everybody. And some people that grate on you, maybe God put them in your life for a reason. We like to say they're like heavenly sandpaper in us. So you just want to be able to work with them and, just kind of handle those difficult people. Dealing with late people in the group or maybe people who don't show up, one of the best things I'd recommend is making their house the house you meet at. So they'll never be late again because you're coming to them. So, but you want to deal with that. Understand things like childcare, humor, humility, eye contact, appropriate dress. Just keep those things. It's just common sense. In summertime, you don't need to come in your bathing suit, but you want to just dress appropriately. Humor. Those of us that love humor, always be careful so you don't damage people with that. And then the last thing on our acrostic here is E, is encourage shared ownership. Now, this is a valuable part of helping everybody feel like they're part of the group. Now, one of the common mistakes leaders make is they don't want to impose on other people. So you do everything, but it's actually counterproductive to your group. You want to get your group involved. You want to help share responsibility, because when people take responsibility and ownership for the group, they feel they have skin in the game. They feel valued. So when you provide ownership to the group and you give them maybe simple ways, like if your group's just starting out, our group still does this, is, even though we've been together for a while, is, everyone brings someone brings a salt, someone brings a sweet, someone brings a drink, and someone hosts the group. It's a simple way to get value brought into it. But one of the things we're going to do a little bit later on in the ministry section is we're going to show you how you can ratchet that up, how you can develop roles that are more robust and more aligned around their spiritual gifting. Now, some of the ways that you can bring shared ownership is this. One is by using the small group guidelines, being able to help people, kind of go through that. In your appendix is this simple ways to, when you start the group, when you stop it, how long it's going to go, what are you going to study, how are you going to do childcare, different things like that. You can use a small group evaluation. Again, another resource that's in the back of your leader's guide is being able, or your learner's guide is being able to, kind of discover what's been working, what hasn't been working, and kind of like what should be next in your small group. You can subgroup. The classic thing I always get is people always ask, when is your group too big? When is your group too large? Or how large can my group get is usually what I get asked. And here's the answer. Your group can grow as big as you want as long as everybody gets to talk. If everybody's not talking, one of two things has to happen. Either one is sometimes some people need to be quiet. I was being polite. Shut up would have been a more clear word. But, or the other thing is you need to subgroup. And what do I mean by subgroup? Well, generally, once you start to approach having over 8 people, what you need to do is for some of the discussion time, break the group up into smaller groupings. Some people go to the kitchen, some people go to the living room, some people go to the dining room. Avoid the bedrooms. But you want to be able to get different groups of people in different parts of the home. So the numbers go down, so the sharing can go up. You want to make sure that you're able to help talk time go up. Another great way is to subgroup by gender in your group. So for us at Saddleback Church, you can grow a group as large as the home permits. Some homes are pretty big and some people get 40, 50 people in their home. So we don't manage off the number of people in the group, we manage off the ratio. So you want to be always, you want to start together, you want to subgroup during, and you want to come back together to close. Here are the natural byproducts that happen when you encourage shared ownership. First fill in right there is people start moving from your group to our group. And that's what you really want. You don't want to be, just, the one facilitating everything in the group. Matter of fact, one of the resources we have for our leaders is don't lead alone. Another part of the fill-in that's very valuable for here is when you remember when numbers go up, care goes down. And that's why subgrouping is such a big piece in helping people feel they can contribute. The bottom line is somebody doesn't talk in your group, you're going to lose them. Maybe not physically, but definitely emotionally. So here's what we want to do. In the back of your learner's guide are 2 planning pages that we want you to look at. One is my group's game plan, and the other one is my church's game plan. Now, in each one of those, there are planners for you to work on. And what I want you to do is be able to work on the planner, but only work on the section in fellowship. Now, you may say to yourself, when I'm working through the group planner or through the church planner, I'm not sure of any ideas. Well, a couple pages back, you'll see we have a whole page of ideas on fellowship in the church game plan, and we have a whole, on connection, and then a whole set of ideas in the group game plan for you to work on. So what I want to do is I want to break you up and start to work on those planners. So jump in.